collecting your bombs and defeating your enemy as you go make this coin-op conversion one of the most high-scoring and exciting games available. So that's the back of Bombjack. If you were worried that you wouldn't be able to get a lot of points in it, because of course that was important back then, you could trade those in for your dignity. Hello, it's Stephanie Sterling here, and if you couldn't tell from my authentic outfit, today we are talking about Bombjack, because the state of the modern video game industry is so bloody terrible that this is what we're resorting to. But you know what? I've never actually talked about Bombjack, a game that was a big part of my formative years, a game that I was always fascinated by, a game that had bombs in it, but no explosions. When you think of platforming icons from the 1980s, a number of names invariably spring to mind. Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong are the only two invariables, followed by names that variably come to mind, such as Pitfall, Bubble Bobble, and of course the universally renowned Auf Wiedersehen Monty. Bombjack is somewhere in there, and I think that's the best way to describe its legacy as it stands today. Bombjack is somewhere in history. It is a legacy I myself have always aspired to. And has always been too much to fucking ask. Not completely forgettable, not completely remembered, Bombjack was rather popular in its day, but never got to embed itself in gaming culture the way some of its contemporaries did. There's not exactly an active Bombjack community or anything, it's merely a game a few old geekos remember. There's not exactly a wealth of catalogued history on the bloody thing. Still, with a classic arcade game, generally well-received home console port, and an entirely different sequel called Mighty Bombjack, I don't know, maybe there's enough to make a video out of it? Arcades were still very much a thing when I was a child. We moved around the country a lot, following the whims of my evil stepdad, and I recall spending a lot of time in coastal towns. Not nice coastal towns, I hasten to add. Great Yarmouth was as glamorous as it got. Glam or not, they had arcades, and I spent time wandering around them, dazzled by the pretty lights and only very rarely actually playing anything because we were poor as shit. There are two things I vividly remember about arcades from back then. Those little rubber monster finger puppets with the spindly wobbly arms, and Bombjack. So ends an establishing chapter that definitively introduces the topic and naturally leads us into discussing the game itself, with myself having definitely resisted the urge to immediately derail my own script because I just remembered those little rubber monster finger puppets and want to talk about them for no good goddamn reason. So anyway, those little rubber monster finger puppets with the spindly wobbly arms, not a single one of them had eyes that looked in the same direction, did they? Hand painted, you see, presumably by people who weren't paid anywhere near enough to give a dog's flaps about the artistic quality of a little rubber monster finger puppet with spindly wobbly arms. And no matter how they were designed, there was always one that looked like a startled alligator guy. They still make them, by the way. They're not as good. Too uniform, too clean, not full of random deformities, because they weren't so much mass-produced back then as mass-splurted. They still do the obligatory startled alligator guys, though. So, that's some stuff I said. God's sake, Stephanie, why do you ruin your own show like this? Okay, let's get back on track, and do not think about the plastic soldiers with half a shopping bag for a parachute. Bombjack was released by Tecmo in 1984, which doesn't make it the same age as me because I'm a young, vibrant 20-something. A single-screen, vertical platformer, its cabinet had a somewhat uniquely elongated screen for the type of game it was. Funnily enough, in my head, I remember it being a far larger display, the cabinet being mostly a freestanding screen, and obviously it wasn't that. Child brains are stupid. so all of our memories are wrong. At least that's what my mum says when I tell her about the time that she... The aim of the game is to collect all the bombs on screen while avoiding an increasing array of mummy-born monsters. Bombjack was unique for its day thanks to the titular character's ability to not quite fly. He can jump pretty much from the bottom of the screen to the very top and control his descent in a clunky fashion. The player character's use of the entire screen as a playing field made him stand out from his horizontally oriented platforming counterparts, at least according to the slender Wikipedia page on the game at any rate. When you pick up your first bomb, another bomb on the screen will light its fuse. As a kid, this consistently made me panic because it's, you know, a bomb with a lit fuse. Weirdly though, they never go off. The lit fuse is part of the scoring system. Every lit bomb you collect lights another while giving you bonus points, and if you collect them in sequence, power-ups appear and you get a bonus at the end if you collected a lot of them. There's a bit of a risk-reward thing going on, since collecting bombs regardless of if they're lit or not will naturally end a level quicker, whereas the merciless spawn rate of enemies makes following the fuses an increasingly tricky prospect. Okay, but like I really thought the bombs would blow up. The game is called Bombjack, but there are no explosions and the bombs never go off, which flies in the face of everything cartoons told me about round balls with a little sticky out part and a bit of string on it. All bombs always fizz for a bit and blow up. That's the rules. Well, Bombjack fooled me and my Looney Tunes logic. Despite never seeing a single thing blow up in all my time playing, I never took the chance and spent most of my life thinking that something bad would happen if I did. Why are they bombs in the first place? The answer's quite simple. Who the fuck knows? Jack jumps in a flash. Like the movie Jumping Jack Flash, which used to air on TV all the time for some reason, and I used to watch it because we had 4 telly channels and no internet back then, so what were you gonna do? Not watch Jumping Jack Flash? Them's were the rules back then. You'd watch Jumping Jack Flash, Police Academy 2, and Beverly Hills Cop 3 of an evening, and a state-mandated viewing of Flight of the Navigator on Sunday afternoons after the EastEnders omnibus. I didn't have to say any of what I just said. Jack doesn't even jump in a flash, whatever that means. I just wanted to say Jumping Jack Flash. Pressing the jump button makes Jack leap very high, while pushing up with the jump gets him to the very top of the screen. Once in the air, further presses of the button stop him in his tracks for a split second. When ascending, this cuts the jump off early, and while descending, it gives you control, as you can move left or right to quote-unquote glide in a stuttery fashion. I always forget that you can cancel the jump, but it's an essential tactic for getting to mid-level platforms and avoiding hazards. During a stage, you'll get tokens appearing, sliding around the platform surfaces and giving out yet more points when grabbed. The more important item is this cheeky little fella, a P token that bounces around the screen and briefly turns all enemies on screen into collectible coins. Very briefly. Very, very, very briefly, because this game is a bastard. Playing Bombjack for the first time in a long time, I've come to really appreciate / unappreciate what a mean little sod it really is. The basic mummy enemies invariably get in the way of bombs for one thing, rarely leaving them exposed for collection and buying other creatures time to keep you away from them. You've probably noticed something about the mummy behaviour by now, but I think that deserves its own chapter, so we will come back to this. Not only is the enemy spawn rate high, every monster has its own movement pattern, seemingly designed to work in concert with the other ones and play you like a fiddle as you try to avoid them. By the standards of games designed not so much to challenge a player as to outright beat them, there's an elegance to its antagonism. At least I think so.
I must break you.
Birds follow your movements accurately in a bid to home in on you, but can only change direction by moving in right angles, which can be exploited, but it's also confusing. These round bouncy things also follow you, but are restricted to pinballing off surfaces, once again bound by a rule both limiting for them and misdirecting for you. These UFOs are by the way, idly floating around until they get an opportunity to launch themselves at you like little
Skeleton warriors.
On top of that, Bomjack's one of those arcade games where 1 coin equals you 1 play, and 1 play equals 3 lives with no continues. You can earn free guys with deft playing, but no amount of money will rescue your progress if you die mid-run. It's an arcade game, innit? It's an arsehole like that. I don't care what anyone says, it might be a classic, but Final Fight is a cheap piece of shit because it was designed as an expensive piece of shit. And that's Nutjack in a bombshell. Ugh. No, I quite like to see Bomjack balls deep in an Insecticon.
Yeah. You know, I spoil you.
Like many popular arcade games, Bomjack was ported to a number of home systems, and like many ports, the quality varied wildly between the various machines and their different specs. This is good news for anyone trying to make a full-length video about Bomjack, as going over these ports is a great way to fill time. We had a Commodore 64 and a ZX Spectrum growing up, both years past their prime, because this was back in the day when an older system meant a cheaper system, not one with its prices jacked up disgustingly high on eBay. You could get games by the bucketful too, or in our case, a huge tarpaulin bag, where cassettes both boxed and unboxed, working and not working, were crammed, along with some mysterious sticky brown gunk that got spilled in there at some point, and covered a not insignificant number of games. We had Whizball, we had Barbarian, we had this top-down shooter about a wizard that I can barely remember. I just recall reading the manual because the enemy section was the first time I saw the word hindrance, and I have no idea why that stuck in my mind at all.
Well, none of these look right. I'm coming up on deadline. Probably shouldn't have taken so long drawing Bomjack humping an Insecticon.
Speaking of not remembering things, we also had Bomjack, but I can't for the life of me recall which version we had. You'd think I would, because the two look quite different. The Commodore 64 is the best looking of the old ports, easily. It had things like colours, which gave it the edge over the Spectrum, and recognisable character models, unlike whatever it was the Amstrad was doing. Aside from the fact it doesn't look as good as the arcade counterpart, Bomjack C64 plays the same. By far its biggest problem is its hitbox detection. Coming off the arcade version to this one makes it tangibly clear how close you don't have to be to an enemy to die. It makes risky tactics like grabbing bombs from mummy-patrolled platforms far more dangerous than it should be, and you just can't trust the game enough to feel confident while playing. One notable aspect of Bomjack C64 is its backing music, a plinky-plonky version of Jean-Michel Jarre's Magnetic Fields. That happened quite a bit back then. Old cassette-based games and licensed music, well, I don't know if it was licensed. Who knows if they ever paid for these tracks? I hope you paid Johann Sebastian Bach for that, Friday the 13th. Jesus, calm down. The ZX Spectrum is very much in line with how Spectrum games look. Thanks to colour limitations, characters are monochrome, with anything not rendered in solid black left clear with the background layer visible behind. Haha, stupid game designers from the 80s. They didn't have technology. Jackasses. Losers. Alright, I'm sorry. Friday the 13th. Shut up. Looking at this makes me realise we have long since passed the era where ports were unique enough to be interesting subject matter, at least when we're not talking about Bomjack. A strive for parity across platforms and the diminishing returns on graphics means versions are largely the same now, with differences coming down to optimization. PC versions tend to be able to look a bit better but can have more bugs or instability if Capcom publishes them, and that's kind of all the notability there is these days. I mean, compare it to when, say, Doom on the PlayStation had a completely different mood to the PC original thanks to its bespoke lighting and music. It's generally a better thing that users of any system get the same experience, don't get me wrong, but the era of port diversity is nonetheless cool to look back on. If we're not talking about Bomjack, which is only interesting to me. And then there's this poor mangled mess. Look at Jack there. The sad Amstrad-y bastard. Yeah, here's why the age of vastly different ports is best left in a bygone state, because these twisted freaks look like it hurts. I can imagine Bomjack with a flamethrower in that room full of failed clones from Alien Resurrection getting ready to burn the suffering results of science gone too far. That said, the Amstrad version is the easiest one. Jack controls very reliably, and the enemies seem to be more forgiving. Silver linings, etc. There were other home system ports, but the only other somewhat notable version is the Game Boy one. This version was criticised at the time because the small characters were hard to see on the handheld's bloody terrible screen. Playing it on an emulator with much clearer visuals reveals that the game itself is still pretty good. It's a rather faithful port that looks cute and has a really nice musical theme. Some games are just inherently unsuited to certain platforms, however, and Bombjack Game Boy demonstrates exactly how much the quality of an experience can be impacted by the plastic housing it. Right, so what is the deal with the mummies and their entire shit? It was only during a recent replay that I actually questioned the bizarre life cycle of enemies in the Bombjack worlds. That's weird, right? Like, even for arcade games, where they'd have any old bollocks on screen because who cares and everyone's on drugs, it's bloody peculiar. So every monster starts life as a mummy, which spawns in from nowhere. It will walk back and forth along the platform it spawns on 2 times before falling off of it, and when it lands it transforms into a bird. Or a bowl. Or a UFO. If information does exist on the deep lore of these things, it would be in this, The Guide to Mighty Bombjack, which is silly expensive off eBay, and would take months to get here, so it's useless and probably doesn't even have anything, plus it's Mighty Bombjack, not Bombjack, so it's of dubious canon as far as I'm concerned. Many old games didn't really have canon as we understand it. They didn't even have a consistent idea of what a video game's own protagonist looks like. I mean, just look at how many different ways Bombjack had been officially drawn in his heyday. That one's metal, like figuratively, but also literally too. That ain't a grotty blue balaclava he's made out of his mum's knickers. That is a Bombjack who fucks. So I had no information on the enemies when I was writing the script. Then, quite by chance, I stumbled on this post on nintendoclassics.net about Mighty Bombjack, and they have a manual excerpt, which, due to the localization standards of the day, was quite poorly written in English, but it tells us that the mummies are called ever-changing. It has 6 patterns of changing itself. So my idea that the monsters were random prizes in a bandagey Kinder Egg, that's out the window. The bird is called Rube. It is very much revengeful towards Jack, and it pursues him endlessly. No idea what Jack did to make a bird so full of revenge, but I like to think it pursues him doggedly around the country, torturing the fuck out of him like in I Saw the Devil. This is CG, which, considering it was the 80s, is a startling amount of technology to have on an NES cartridge. A survivor of the Gigi family. It's troublesome. This one's a heel. I mean, obviously, it's a baddie. It narrates the pyramid legend weirdly. Weird. So we're jumping ahead a bit because the Mighty Bombjack section's coming later. Oh, that's something to look forward to. But to give you the premise, it's set in a pyramid where Jack is pursuing the king of the demons. And apparently it was a pyramid full of tortoises, because if we look at Lizzie's entry, it is an ancestor of the tortoises that had lived in an ancient pyramid. And it's only just now that I've worked out it was never a UFO, it was a tortoise shell. Billy. It was a pet of King Demon Beelzebut in the old days. This time it takes the field. Beelzebut. It's like an arsehole. Then there's DG, the known villain. His flame always carries the kiss of death. It's the first I've known about it. Then we have Hiji, who's got a really sad Lego Man face and is yelling for help. A brave soldier who was imprisoned and made a slave. If you could help him, you could get a high score. See, gamers? There is a good reason to dismantle slavery. Anyway, I can't tell you why he's called Bombjack, why the bombs are there, why the bombs don't explode, but I can tell you that the UFO was a tortoise the whole time. What a twist. Bomb Jack never got to become a big old franchise like so many of his contemporaries. However, there were a handful of other Bomb Jack games, including an official numbered sequel I knew nothing about and had never played before starting this video. Bomb Jack 2 was released in 1986 for 8-bit home consoles only, and after not hearing about it for 39 years despite it being a UK #1 charter, I am finally going to play Bomb Jack 2.
Country roads, take me home to the...
Yeah. #1 seller, eh? They were strapped for games back then. Mighty Bomb Jack is the better known of the follow-ups and an infinitely better game than whatever the fuck that shit was. It ditched a lot of the arcade original's flavour, going for the scrolling platformer shtick instead of the arcade game fare, though special rooms throughout the levels played like the single-screen original. You could actually get the game's specially good ending by pulling off a trick that let you skip from one of these single-screen rooms directly to the next one, going in sequence and basically cutting most of the game out. Doing this, however, is balls hard. I ain't never gonna do it. The main villain is the guy we mentioned earlier, Beelzebub, and I don't know if you know this, he's named after an arse. Mighty Bomb Jack wasn't too bad as far as ancient platformers go. Jack behaved similarly to his arcade incarnation and was just as defenceless. Though here he'd have treasure chests he could open by jumping on them and the ability to change colours which allowed different chests to be opened. As well as being able to turn enemies into coins, he also had another power to deal with the rapidly spawning horde, the power to exploit the limited system memory by getting them off camera and disappearing the bastards from existence. Game was alright. Amazing publicity art though, just to get back to this. I want whatever game this guy belongs to. That Jack fucks. There was also Bomber Jack Twin. Bomber Jack Co-op. That's it. Really. This is possibly one of the most high-effort scripts I've ever written for what is almost certainly going to be the least watched video ever. I've finally talked about Bomb Jack though, my arcade game of choice, the retro title that among all others spoke to me for reasons I didn't understand back then, but after doing this, I possibly understand even less. It was a tortoise shell the whole time. Huh. Screen after screen of challenging fun. Well, that's Bomb Jack for you. This bit is superfluous. I've just talked your ear off about Bomb Jack. And those of you who are still here, if you were waiting for some big payoff, some punchline, no, that was a legitimate Bomb Jack video. There was no big joke or big satirical point being made. Oh, there it is. There we are. There we go. Thank God for me and all that. I'm just going to stand and look at that wall until next Monday. God, Warner Brothers can go to hell.